I missed the sexual revolution. I spent the 70s in celibacy. A combination of shyness and morality conspired to make me lonely. But in 1982, I was ready. Small town boy hits the big city. Chicago, watch out. I lived on the north side near Newtown, in the heart of the gay community, and the news was spreading around. Sex kills. Condoms were tripling in price. The laws of supply and demand were in full force. I was a social worker by day and a musician by night, and a thriving folk music scene was at gay bars with names such as His and Hers, Opal Station, and Different Strokes. One singer performed under the name of Christopher Street, which I later learned was a street in Greenwich Village where the Stonewall protests and gay parades started. Chris was an African American, and he usually ended his sets with a song, "We may have come over on different ships, but we're all in the same boat now." He was the first person I knew that died of AIDS. My friend Mary called me and told me that we were having a benefit concert in his honor. We were all in the same boat indeed. Sexually active and scared to death. Or should I say, scared to life. The risks were real and we were careful. But no one knew that the infections could lie dormant years before AIDS appeared. So even those who were careful were dying too. A few years later, I was in seminary, and a friend told me that Larry had died, and that an AIDS panel for the AIDS quilt was up at Different Strokes for people to look at. So I made my way up there, and I talked to the bartender, and the bartender said, "Oh, we've already sent it away to join the National AIDS Quilt." And the bar was empty. And I could remember Larry's sweet tenor voice. He bore a physical resemblance and also sounded an awful lot like Art Garfunkel. And I remember an evening where we were sitting on the bar, and there was some random jazz on the jukebox, and he was singing, scatting real high, and I was kind of filling in the bottom. Something was changing. After grad school, I got a job working for the hospice in Kenosha, and was working with AIDS patients there, and I eventually started working with the AIDS service in Kenosha, being a case manager for people living with HIV. I would go down to the health department and be with people as they heard the news. I took people to the hospital, helped them fill out forms for Medicaid. My job was to help them live positively. Positive living, critical for health. And it basically included the steps that we all should follow. Eat well, exercise, get plenty of rest, listen to your body, listen to your doctor. And the last one was hardest because the medicine was awful. It made people feel sicker, even when the lab results said they were getting better. And only those with a positive attitude could survive. There were people that had a fearlessness about them. They were given a death sentence, as AIDS was at the time, and were determined to live the rest of their lives to the fullest. They would speak in the community and increase public awareness. I would look at the drug studies that came along. And I remember one for a drug called D4T. It showed that the blood count for the control group was unchanged, and that the blood count for those receiving the placebo rose some, and those that were receiving the actual medicine rose a little bit more, significantly more, but a little bit more than the placebo. And I got thinking that most of the effect of this drug was thinking that one was taking it, thinking that one had a chance for survival. Living positively was a defense against the increase of the disease process. As I left AIDS casework to be a minister, finally new drugs were coming out that really worked, and people with HIV started living longer. And one of the paradoxical results of fewer people dying from AIDS is that 10 years later, AIDS is hardly ever in the news. I seldom see a red ribbon. I see yellow ribbons for the troops, camouflage ribbons, pink ribbons for breast cancer, multicolored puzzle piece ribbons for autism, spotted ribbons for puppies. But you very seldom see a red ribbon for AIDS on a lapel. Hollywood has forgotten AIDS, but AIDS has not gone away. Over 1 million people in this country have contracted HIV. There are 1,400 cases diagnosed in Forsyth County. In this country, over 500,000 people have died from AIDS. It's averaged about 16,000 to 17,000 a year so far this decade. 16,000 per year. The Iraqi war has taken 4 years to kill 3,000 Americans. At this rate, we would need to be in Iraq 16 more years to equal 1 year's death from AIDS of Americans. Yet, no red ribbons. AIDS deaths have decreased. In 1996, there was around 50,000 deaths due to AIDS, and 16,000 seems small by comparison. But it's still too many, especially when they are all preventable. Worldwide, the numbers are worse. According to the UN, there's nearly 40 million people living with HIV, 24 million in sub-Saharan Africa, about 6% of the population. Unitarian Universalists have responded to this nationally. There's the UU Global AIDS Coalition, founded as a social action group at the First Unitarian in Portland, with the goals of education, political advocacy, and direct service. And there was an action of immediate witness at GA in 2003, committing UUs to speak out as a voice for liberal religion and congregations to be engaged in addressing global AIDS issues. Largely as a result, the UU Advocacy Office now has people working on global AIDS issue and have come up with the Red Ribbon campaign. And what is a Red Ribbon congregation? Congregation that has at least two of the following: an active process for ongoing education about HIV/AIDS, an active process for taking actions relevant to government programs, political advocacy, a program involved with a community project regarding AIDS in Africa, and an active fundraising project that is in support of HIV projects, either local or global. We as a congregation are already doing many of these things. Each year, we participate in the Interfaith Thanksgiving service, and the collection from that goes to the AIDS Care Service. At Christmas, we donate teddy bears to go to children and families affected by HIV. And each February, which is just next month, we raise money for the AIDS Care Service through our I Said Red dinner. It'll be next month on February 10th, and keep your eyes open for details. And we can make this year's dinner the best ever. And then when the weather warms up, there's the AIDS Memorial Garden at Tanglewood. It was developed in the 90s by a teen from our congregation, Carrie Watson and her friend, as a Girl Scout project. And it's a pathway of commemorative bricks and benches for sitting amongst the towering trees. It's a place where we have held interfaith memorial services. It's a place where we can go alone to remember those who have died. It was originally maintained by an organization called Hope, but since they've disbanded, we from this congregation have been sending a work team to rake and weed and care for the garden. And we have another HIV prevention program. Our Whole Lives curriculum teaches our children about their bodies. And there's a meeting today for children as young as kindergarten to start this process about knowing about their bodies. Being able to talk frankly about sexual decisions from even a young age will help our next generation be healthier and happier. The way to defeat AIDS is through positive living. Almost anything that makes the world better will reduce HIV. We can start with ourselves. Our sexuality is deeply personal. It is a combination of our animal and spiritual natures. It contributes to our self-definition. What risks are we taking? If we understand our sexuality, what compels us, who we are, if we know why we're having sex, we are likely to do it more wisely. So often as a case manager, I saw clients who were so conflicted about sex that they had to take alcohol or drugs to loosen up. And if we need to get into an altered state in order to participate in sex, it's very unlikely that we'll be careful when we actually do it. But if we affirm a basic thing that's very seldom affirmed by any other religion, that sex is good. Sex is a gift to be shared. If we are aware of our sexuality as a gift, we are more likely to share that gift in the healthiest and happiest way. Poverty contributes to HIV infection, both locally and worldwide. If we work to alleviate poverty, we will lower HIV infection rates. If we increase access to health care, we will reduce AIDS deaths. If we provide treatment for IV drug users instead of jail and needle exchange programs, we can reduce infection. If we empower women to feel that they have just the right to ask their sexual partner to wear a condom, we will reduce HIV infection. In this country and across the world, fear of male violence is a major contribution to unsafe sex. If we fight for the separation of church and state, we will prevent AIDS death and HIV infection. Because of pressure from the religious right, our government sponsors abstinence-only programs that give medical information about the effectiveness of condoms. They have statements that say that HIV can be passed through sweat, and just incredible misinformation trying to scare our children away from sexuality. And these programs actually do a worse job of preventing teen pregnancy than programs that give accurate information about birth control. AIDS. It's a global problem, and it is as small as our innermost thoughts. The virus is microscopic with worldwide implications. Those who say that it's a punishment from God, and 30 years on, it's amazing that these people still exist. They reveal that they worship a God of hate. But our tradition affirms love in all its variety. Love is a positive force for good. We know love by many names, both spiritual and mundane. But the acts of love are the secret to living positively. Whether we share love intimately with a partner or globally with international assistance, from our bedrooms or to the savannas of Africa, we can make a world of difference. The hymn this morning is "Make Channels for the Streams of Love." And as we sing it, I urge all of you to think of ways to channel the most precious gift you have to give the world, your capacity to love. Please rise as you are able and join in singing hymn number 299.